entire government, there are no technical skills. There are no economists, there are no power engineers, there are no railway people, there are no cost benefit analysts. So all the systems are broken inside the government. We never modernized our laws. We had we had a civil service that we inherited. We kept it exactly as it is. It's a non-technical civil service. It's a civil service made of colonial gentlemen who try and wing it in a very, very technical modern world. Judicial system is that of the colonial system, which relies on arbitrary laws. It's really not a modern judicial system. They'll tell you the colonial system was meant to extract from here and take. That system still continues. Now the extractive powers are the local bureaucracy and the judiciary and the army, and they want to extract and keep the money for themselves and mostly take it away too. And we don't believe in the market. The colonial state, if you recall, did not believe in the market. It meant in crushing the local initiative. Even today, we crush local initiative. For example, I'm in Karachi right now, talking about this with many people. We take agriculture, which is one of our largest sectors. Agriculture, there is no market.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nauraiz Rana, and I'm an economist with the World Bank. I'll be hosting today's program on New Wave, in which I will be covering the economic crisis that Pakistan faced in the year 2023. We'll go over some of Pakistan's major problems. And joining me today here is a very special guest. I would like to introduce Dr. Nadeem Haque, who is a senior economist and has had decades of experience behind him. He served as the deputy chairman of the Pakistan Planning Commission. He's been with he's worked with the IMF for over 20 years, and most recently he's serving as the vice chancellor of Pakistan's Institute of Development Economics, PIDE. So thank you so much for joining us today here, sir.
Pleasure to be with you, Nauraiz. Pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we begin and I turn to you, I'd just like to set the stage a little bit. The year 2023 wasn't so different in terms of how Pakistan's economy did and how it has been faring over the last few years, at least. But still, in some aspects, it was the worst that we've experienced. We started in January 2023 with our foreign reserves dwindling at about $3.1 billion. And that is less than 2 weeks of import cover. That's what it covers. By May 2023, our inflation was hitting over 38%. Our food inflation was somewhere near 50%. And these are staggering figures in terms, if you look at its impact on the common man, the local population of the country. The interest rates were hiked by 300 basis points by the government. It went over 20%, the highest it has been since October 1996. The real GDP contracted by over 0.6%. And all of these measures had a lasting impact on the energy crisis, on basic livable conditions that people tend to face. One of the key issues that we faced that, again, carried through from 2022 was the fact that we were unable to find an agreement with the IMF on a structural adjustment program. Eventually, it happened in June of this year, and Pakistan reached a staff level agreement of $3 billion. The next tranche of 700 million, which would be released in January 2024, given that the agreements that were made Pakistan's been able to satisfy those. So now turning towards you, we have been in this conundrum for quite a while, for years actually. This is going to be Pakistan's 23rd program with the IMF. Actually, we've already had 23rd, so any other program will be the 24th program with the IMF. Why do you think that Pakistan still continues to suffer from these structural issues, these chronic problems, and we tend to go back and forth with multilateral organizations, and we turn towards our bilateral partners and other countries such as the UAE, China, Saudi?
Notice the fundamental problem is that we continue to think of Pakistan as a normal country which has structures of a advanced economy, which has capability and competence, to use some sense term, which has capabilities and competence of a modern state. In many ways, Pakistan never did become a modern state. We started running with the paraphernalia that the colonial state left us. We never modernized our laws. We had we had a civil service that we inherited. We kept it exactly as it is. It's a non-technical civil service. It's a civil service made of colonial gentlemen who try and wing it in a very, very technical modern world. Their incentives are all wrong. Their incentives are to serve the colonial master because the colonial master's terms of giving them massive privileges, massive benefits that rely on colonial largesse are intact. We tacked onto them a global infrastructure where their incentives now are to find a way into the World Bank, into UN system, into this system, that system, where the international agencies take them on scholarships and on tours everywhere. So the state is that in the entire government, there are no technical skills. There are no economists, there are no power engineers, there are no railway people, there are no cost benefit analysts. So all the systems are broken inside the government. If you go back and think about it, Pakistan inherited no economists, no engineers to begin with. Then we slowly created some, but as we create them, they run away from the country faster than we create them, because quite frankly, the generalist civil service wants to hold no one back. So everybody who's educated runs away. The second thing is that our judicial system is that of the colonial system, which relies on arbitrary laws. It's really not a modern judicial system. So they thresh about and interfere in the marketplace all the time. And this brings me to another point. We do not believe in markets. We have a system, the colonial system never believed in markets, never believed in entrepreneurships. If you read the books by Shashi Tharoor and other people, they'll tell you the colonial system was meant to extract from here and take to the West. That system still continues. Now the extractive powers are the local bureaucracy and the judiciary and the army, and they want to extract and keep the money for themselves and mostly take it away too. So that system remains intact. In every which way, we are not a modern state. And we don't believe in the market. The colonial state, if you recall, did not believe in the market. It meant in crushing the local initiative. Even today, we crush local initiative. For example, I'm in Karachi right now, talking about this with many people. We take agriculture, which is one of our largest sectors. Agriculture, there is no market. The bureaucracy controls the seed, the bureaucracy controls the input, the bureaucracy controls the output. They set the prices. Then we take any other industry. We have licenses, we have NOCs, we have this regime that continues, where markets are thoroughly discouraged and bureaucratic permissions take over. So any investor, much of his time is spent seeking bureaucratic permissions. On top of that, along come the IMF and the World Bank, and they want to just simply do a quick fix solution because obviously they don't have the time, nor do they have the local expertise. So they want to do a quick fix solution. The IMF is mainly thinking of making the books balance, and that too short-term books. They don't want to think about the long term. So it's a short-term book balancing setup that the IMF does. So they merely play around with the income statement. They worry about taxation only. The World Bank has lending targets. So they want to lend money to us. They'll do all kinds of things. They'll say, okay, here's a cup broken, fix it. We'll give you some money. Here's a system, something up. They've got excess manpower. So they keep coming up with fresh ideas to, lend money. And we are hungry for money, so we keep borrowing. Then at the same sector, in another instance, we have all these other consultants who have a vested interest in taking aid money. UN brings in the SDGs. Now, we have 114 SDGs. We don't have the capability of managing one. But now we are running around chasing 114 SDGs, 20,000 programs with the World Bank, then several programs by other donors. So we really don't know. We are chasing our tail. We are running around doing these things. So quite frankly, if you put this cocktail together, there's no way that we can work our way out of this unless we deeply, deeply restructure the colonial state We modernize our systems. We still don't use digital technology anyway. We are a paper-based, in fact, not even a paper-based economy. We are a paper-based economy of the 19th century. Everything that we do, we put in sextuplicate or triplicate or whatever. We carry huge tons of paper and we file them and we file them and we file them and we file them. Every entrepreneur's time is spent filing paper.
And
How can you
absolutely,
progress this? This is
yeah,
the situation. If you look at it in a nutshell, nobody will tell you this. We pretend that Pakistan is a normal state. All we have to do is collect taxes and do whatever the World Bank says. I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that.
absolutely. I think you've hit the nail in the head to say so because A, you mentioned about the fact that there's lack of entrepreneurship, and it drills down that there hasn't been much private sector development. We continue to see our private entities, our state-owned enterprises, year on year, decades on decades, operating on losses, which again, obviously, drill down to greater public debt. There's larger amounts of, public expenditure that we tend to incur because of these very factors. And in this modern day, 9 out of 10 jobs are created by the private sector. The only job that the government has is to create the right de jure environment and to make sure that in de facto it's implemented correctly so that there's the legal, the regulatory, the policy environment is such that it is conducive for private sector growth. However, in Pakistan, we see absolutely, and whenever there's talk about privatization, there's a lot of pushback, and it also comes. The pushback also tends to come back from political parties and those political stakeholders. And then you rightly mentioned about lack of digitization, and that is why I feel that Pakistan's informal sector, I believe, is over 60 to 70%, according to certain estimates, that we continue to operate in shadows. And there's a incentive tied to it as well, because many of those large industries, we're not talking about, street vendors when we talk about informal economy. There are large industries that do operate under the shadow because they do not want to disclose, the amount of profits that they're making, the amount of contribution to they have, which is again deterrent to formal private sector growth. But then coming back to the point, what are the mechanisms? We cannot isolate political economy from economic development. Those political factors undoubtedly are very grossly tied. But then what is the way out of it? We can't rely, like you mentioned, on international organizations. And personally, I feel that it's not even their mandate. Because if you look at the IMF is there just to help countries with short-term liquidity. That is what they're there to do. They're not there to fix how you manage or how you govern your country. Then who do you think can steer the ship out of this crisis? How do we, move out of it? Because we're already a population of 250 million. By 2050, we're estimated to cross 400 million. And, those are scary numbers. We already lack resources to invest in human capital. 30 million kids are out of school, and then the population outburst. How do you envision Pakistan managing the crisis, which is amplifying day by day?
Look, quite frankly, first of all, I disagree with you on a number of propositions. The informal economy is wonderful. Informal economy is what is keeping us afloat. The formal economy is the problem. In this country, the government is bankrupt. The economy is not. When you come to Pakistan, you'll see people are flourishing. It's the government that is bankrupt. And people are flourishing because they're trying to make a life for themselves. They're enterprising. As Adam Smith said, they want to truck and barter. They want to do things. The political economy is that the World Bank, the donors, don't understand the country. And yet they have a disproportionately large role here. Like, can you imagine the World Bank is going around selling a reform agenda for the next government? Where did it get the mandate to do that? Should it be doing that? Is that agenda well consulted, well thought out? Has that agenda been discussed locally? No. And they don't want to discuss, they want to tell us. So the political economy is not our political economy, it's international political economy. When the UN comes with the SDGs, do we even know about it? Some ex-bank World Bankers made the SDGs. And now we have to live with it. And so the issue is that what is the reform that we need? How should it be done? If the World Bank, UN, those guys are going to come and design it, then I'm afraid there's no way out. Because that reform is going to be designed by lending priorities and external forces, as well as people who do not understand our economy. So I think that's a key issue. Now, the issue is what reform do we need at home? Yes, some of us, we are talking about it, we are writing about it, but there's a fundamental disconnect. We do not have the ability to reach our ministers, etc., our leaders, because we have no money. When the World Bank comes with $2 billion, ADB comes with $2 billion, and you have McKinsey with $500 million, and Chemonics with another $300 million from USAID, from this, from that, who will listen to us? So the fundamental, this is Dambisi Moyo thesis, if you read her. The constituency for a government is the foreigners, not us. And we can't stop international bureaucracies because they are too, obviously you need to look after your careers. So international bureaucracy just does not see eye to eye with us. And there's no way we can have that conversation. So the country wants to go in one direction. International bureaucracy wants to go in another direction. It has the money. So the leaders will listen to the international bureaucracy, not the local people. So there's no local political economy doesn't figure out as much as the international political economy. Now, who's going to win out of all this? My prediction is, who's going to win out of this are the fundamentalists. They have a totally domestic agenda, totally divorced from the international community, like Taliban or whatever. They will probably come and make a change. At some point, things will get so bad that they will take over. And then we'll have to go through a lot of pain. I'm not saying it's going to be happy times for us. It's probably going to be 30, 40 years of pain. But quite frankly, maybe that's what we need. Maybe that's what we need. Because there is no way the international bureaucracy is going to say, okay, guys, let's take a pause and let's try and figure out how we can make this country move forward. And I don't think it's going to happen, not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime. But somewhere along the line, the only break is that only indigenous thought that matters, which is hurtful, which is harmful, which is not the best. But we probably have to go through that phase.
So actually, on that note, the two things which came out of what you've just mentioned, and I was hoping that you would kind of elaborate a bit more on that. So I really want to address the latter part, the fundamentalist taking over, and what you think would be the way out, and it would take some time. But before that, you also mentioned that the government is undoubtedly bankrupt, and we've seen that, and it's very conspicuous, it's very profound. But then you also mentioned that the people are flourishing. And here I just wanted, for you to unpack that a little more as to what does that mean, or what does that imply? Which segment of the population are you referring to? Because we're looking at, again, 2023. In 2022, 34% of Pakistan's population was living under poverty. At the year end 2023, 39.4%. So an additional 20.
Excuse me. Where did you get those figures from?
Those are officially stated figures based on the
3.65. Where? I haven't seen them anywhere.
These are World Bank figures.
World Bank figures. You see, that's the problem. We disagree. PID, which is the largest think tank in Pakistan, disagrees. We think poverty is down to 22%. In fact, on the old line, poverty is down to 8%. If World Bank has a vested interest in increasing poverty figures, fine. These poverty figures are not correct at all. Poverty is nowhere near 40%, not 34%. I'm afraid if you define poverty as me not having a Mercedes, then I'm poor too.
Maybe it is it's at $3.65 per day. The official metric of global poverty.
Let's work at $3.65 per day. $3.65 per day is right now at the current exchange rate almost 1,500 rupees per day. Okay, 1,500 rupees per day divided by 30 and multiplied by 30. Is about 45,000 a month. Then you got a family of 6. You multiply because obviously it's an individual number, you multiply by 6. So you've got, in fact, I think it's more because 5 children is basically, but anyway, let's take a family of 6. Multiply that by 6, that's 3 lakh rupees per month, right? If 3 or 2.4, 28, 240,000 a month. If you take 240,000 a month, you take the household income expenditure survey, that would mean, for God's sakes, 99% of our population is poor.
But sir, we're assuming that all members of the household are earning, which is not, which is unlikely the case to be
No,
in many instances.
but the poverty figure is measured as that, right? I mean, we have to be clear.
Yeah.
This is the problem. World Bank makes these humongous statements and gets away with it. We keep asking them to share the methodology. Tell us. You talk about peer review. Where does the donor do peer review? They don't do peer review, just make announcements. Now, I'm asking you a very simple question. Okay, what is this poverty? $3.65. Is it per family? Is it per individual? It's per
It is
individual.
per individual, yes.
So if it's per individual, then my math is correct. We are talking about 240,000 rupees a month, which is a very high income in Pakistan. So then obviously there's a large number of people who are poor, right? Even today, for example, in Pide, in where I work, for example, or even the Planning Commission, I think almost 90% of people make less money than that a month. So I think these figures really need to be thought through, and before we put them in the public and just sort of start crying over them, tears rolling down our cheeks, we should at least have a peer review and think about it. Whenever we do anything, you tell us get a peer review. So the international donors don't need a peer review; they just make announcements. So I'm sorry, those figures are not correct. Now make your case.
No, but the news that we saw, they were coming out of Pakistan, especially in the summer when the energy crisis was at its peak. People were committing suicide and they were unable to
Where?
pay their bills. I mean,
I mean,
this is
if one
all. Ji, ji.
if one person committed suicide, big look, the suicide rate in Pakistan is still one of the lowest. Happiness, we come out as I think 18, 19 or 20. So come on, it's not that bad. The issue is just this. You come here, you take a look, consumer goods are doing very well. If you look at the growth rate of consumer good company what is this, Unilever or something, growing at 30-40% per annum. If you look at the offtake of Coke and Pepsi and McDonald's, they're doing very well. If you look at the motorcycle sales, they're doing very, very well. If you look at the car sales, you have to wait 2-3 months to get a car. So, the sales figures are showing very well. If you look at the real estate price, it's going through the roof. For example, in Islamabad, there are $1 million properties that are doing well. Not flying off the shelf, but still doing well. Prices are not coming down. If you look at, for example, the number of mobile ownerships or television ownership, they're doing very well. So the informal economy is a saving grace. I shudder for the day when the government closes the informal economy, as the World Bank wants. If they close the informal economy, the Taliban will be nearer to us. They will get there closer. So I think we have to really understand that the only market in Pakistan is the informal economy. And the only market killer in Pakistan is the government. Anything the government touches gets done. For example, take another thing. Take medicines, right? Now, medicines, because they're highly regulated, the government doesn't give them the right price. The cabinet fixes the price for every medicine. This is the regulation. When you have this kind of regulation, and by the way, this is the World Bank kind of participated in this. When you have this kind of regulation, what happens is all the multinationals are leaving Pakistan. And now, for example, there's a huge insulin shortage in the country. We are the highest diabetic country in the world, and we have an insulin shortage. At the same time, other life-threatening drugs are not coming into the country because the government is trying to manipulate the exchange rate. And the IMF tells us they want a clean market exchange rate, but we don't have a market exchange rate. And the IMF closes its eyes and says, it's okay, we'll give you a review. Now, we can't get essential medicines because they won't allow them to be imported. We can't manufacture essential medicines because the government won't allow price increases. So we are stuck in the middle. In the meanwhile, the government comes along because the World Bank and the IMF, etc., say, hey, you must have a social protection. So the government puts in a universal health care. Now, the universal health care, I don't know how it's going to function. Maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road, we'll start crying. What happened? What happened? We've got a huge deficit. But nobody thought through the system. Nobody paid attention as to what are we trying to do, what are the long-term implications of this.
But does that not also have to do with how we allocate our budgets? I mean, it goes without saying, the big elephant in the room, that a majority of spending goes towards, addressing the military gaps, the military budgeting, and a lot of it is taken away from sectors such as education and healthcare.
No,
However,
again, that's just popular mythology. Look, the military takes, if I remember right, the military is about 3 to 4% of GDP, right? And quite frankly, I will not say take money away from the military. I think, quite frankly, defense is something that we need. This has become popular liberal bullshit today. Take guns and butters and things like that. Education, we have a lot of education spending. It's not that we don't have spending. Federal government has little, but the provinces now are spending as much as 30-40% on education. For us, education is not a spending problem. Education is a management issue. We don't know how to provide education. For example, I'll tell you, we've done some research on this. We have 360 universities. And because of this key pressure that, hey, schools, children out of schools, we want to build infrastructure. We build a lot of infrastructure in education. So we build brick and mortar. We built 300 universities, and every politician wants to show off that he's cutting the ribbon for a university. Unfortunately, one thing we forgot: universities are made up of professors. So on average, we have 2 professors per university, full professors, and by Pakistani standards, not international standards, right? Our university education is pathetic. Now go to schools, right? We couldn't make schools. We had schools, and we had very good schools. We had excellent public schools, but the bureaucracy killed them because of the population pressure, and the bureaucracies wanted to divert money toward themselves. So we have these schools, but we killed the schools. We brought in private education. Fair enough. Private education is very expensive. It's serving the rich, but there is also poor private education that's also working very well. But the issue then is that the government wants to set the curriculum, and the curriculum has heavy loads of Islam and other things in it. So there is very little time for modern subjects left. And then we are perpetually confused about Urdu versus English. Every few days we want to put in new Urdu, then we want to put in Arabic, and then English we want to throw out the window. But our biggest advantage is that we do know English. Unfortunately, we're trying to lose that. So if you go back and think about these things a little more carefully, it's not a money issue at all. It is a management issue. Take energy. Biggest problem is energy. Take energy. Our biggest problem is energy. What have we done in energy? It's not that we lack energy. It's a totally misplaced policy where everything is centralized, but we do not want to make the energy market. The World Bank put us on a path of IPPs and dismantling the energy sector, and now we are in a mess. We don't have enough things there, enough management of energy. We are leaking like a sieve in energy. We've got a subsidy policy that's bad. We've got a pricing policy that's bad. I can go into chapter and verse on that.
Yep, absolutely.
Who's going to solve that problem? The World Bank says we're going to solve that. They send in these energy people or tax people, for example. We've had 3 programs of $400 million each, loans that we took, and the tax system gets bad every time. We've had so many programs on energy. We've taken billions of dollars, and the energy sector goes from bad to worse. So how do I think about it? Tell me.
I think the best is to kind of again, the issues with energy, as per my knowledge, hasn't been with energy generation as much as it has been about management, governance, and transmission. And it all comes
basically
down to
management and governance, not transmission. Management and governance. First of all, tell me, 20, 30 years ago, the World Bank insisted that there should be rural electrification. Do we need rural electrification? Must every village have electricity? So I think that was a misplaced concept that we spent a lot of time. We spread the grid left, right, and center. Now we've got a huge grid and we talk about this. So look, the point is, let us at least begin to develop an energy system that we need and not that the consultant needs. We needed local grids. We didn't need a big, large grid system, which we've developed. Now, obviously, there are energy losses, but that doesn't matter. We can still fix it. But most important of all, do we have an energy system? Do we even have agency in fixing our system? Or is the agency lying in Washington and London and wherever? So I think these are fundamental issues that we have to think through. and talk about, which unfortunately we don't talk about. We take all the blame. We messed up, we messed up. Yes, we messed up. We didn't fix the colonial system. But now we've got a huge number of players in the system that we can't sort out. So what do we do?
So how do we take that agency back, going by what you've mentioned, if that actually is the crux of the problem? I mean, uh,
We are we are trying in the PID. We've done a lot of research. We're writing a lot. We do conferences every bloody day, more or less. We do webinars every day. We do Twitter spaces every day. We are trying to build an agenda for change. We are trying to build an agency for reform. Our biggest problem is fighting the donors because they don't want to cooperate with us. They actually want to fight us. They actually want to go around saying, no, no, please don't listen to us. Don't listen to these guys. Listen to us. I wish we try and form a coalition with them. They don't want to form a coalition because they've got the lending targets, they've got other things, right? And they are very imperial in their attitude. I wish we could get the donors to sit together with the people who want to make change in Pakistan as equals, not as servant and master. Right now, the donors feel they are masters and we are servants. We are trying to build an agenda for change, and we ask them to come in as equals, and they say, no, we don't. And then they spread these things like, for example, poverty rate is 40%, and sometimes they say there's a housing shortage of 10 million people. Come on, there's no housing shortage of 10. We've looked at it. Sometimes they say, oh my God, we could be, you've got remittances coming from India. Well, we are sending remittances to India for $5 billion. Sometimes they'll say it's corruption. Well, okay, fair enough, we've got corruption. But tell me, is US lobbying not corruption? So US
of
lobbying
course,
is clean.
yeah, of
US
course there
lobbying
is.
is
Yeah.
clean. US
But
lobbying
then,
is clean. US
how,
consulting is clean.
how how do you view the inflation numbers? I'm actually very curious.
Hmm?
How do you view
Well,
the inflation numbers, like closer to 40%, and in certain sectors it's beyond 40%, closer to 50% in energy or food?
look, I think inflation is something that honestly I haven't even understood, and I'm trying to understand it. We try to tighten money. We've taken interest rate at 22%. Maybe they should go to 40%. Maybe it's 50%. But I'm not sure about inflation because, quite frankly, there's so many administered prices that they keep changing. Like the gas price has gone up by God knows how many 100%. The oil prices keep going up and down. So the inflation and then wheat prices the government fixes. So there's a lot of administrative price issue that we need to sort out. Somebody needs to really seriously. I mean, I tried to do that once, but we are short staffed. Somebody really needs to, and the World Bank, etc., never do any serious research. They have this gimmicky research. We really need to look at this inflation number honestly and try and understand. Or alternatively, okay, fine, inflation is high. I'm not saying it's not high, but then our growth rate is negative. So we've calculated the sacrifice ratio that if you bring inflation down, growth rate drops. For every percentage point, growth rate dropped by 0.66%, right? Okay. So, okay, let's at least begin to look at the trade-off, the Phillips curve. Let's try and figure out, okay, what is the optimal inflation number? How much should growth come down and where should growth come down? But the bigger problem, bigger problem is we have no investment in the country. Investment is down to 13%. So we have to talk about investment. We have no big companies in the country. Why don't we have big companies in the country? Because the regulatory system, which is so flawed, and nobody has the time to sit down and look at the regulatory system. Every time we mention regulation, no, we'll get FDI, we'll get FDI. Okay, we'll run after FDI. So we get FDI, then we say, oh my God, but we have to repay. We don't know how to repay. So we've tied ourselves into knots because we never really have a good dialogue on these things. And those sectoral experts that come in from McKinsey's or Goldman Sachs or whatever, or hired by the World Bank or the DFID, etc., they leave a short report here. Nobody understands. Nobody has the time to read it. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, like poverty rate has gone up. So, okay, come on, guys. I keep telling them, at least come and do a peer review. If I could help it, I would mandate that all your missions, all these consultants should at least come and give one seminar at our universities so that at least we should have peer review. But they say, no, we can't do that. So tell me, how do we function then?
Of course, these are very, very valid points, and thank you for bringing them to the core and highlighting them. And I feel that there has to be greater communication both between the international organizations and people who are local experts, such as yourself, who are actually running certain research programs on the ground. And I guess more importantly, the onus to some degree does fall on the government as well in order to for them to bolster their internal capacity. Because they are the ones
No,
at the end.
Nauraiz, the government, remember, the government is not answerable to us. The government is answerable to the lenders. So the government is answering to the lenders. They're not answering to us. Why should they improve capacity? When the World Bank and the lenders don't want to improve capacity, when they go to the government and say, hey, we'll do everything for you. Please don't listen to these guys. We'll do everything for you. Why should the government listen to us?
But in an ideal scenario, what I'm trying to come at was because you began the discussion by highlighting that the government does not have technical expertise. They rely on old formats of bureaucracy where people do not really understand what they're doing for. And I guess if the government did have that capacity, then they would have been better able to circumvent or kind of mitigate the
Look,
political economy dynamics that the
if the
country is caught up
lenders
in.
tell them, if the lenders tell them that you don't need the local capacity because we've got McKinsey's, we've got Chemonics, we've got all these guys, we've got the whole industrial overload. We've got 10,000 people or maybe 20,000 people now in the World Bank who need jobs. We've got 100,000 people in the UN who need jobs. And the only way they can't advise the American government, they can't advise the UK government, they can't advise the EU government. They all come here. They don't. India doesn't even want them, so they come and advise here, and we are receptive to them. So obviously, by definition, the government says, "Hey," the government tells me all the time, "Hey, I've got this report from them. Why do I need you?" The World Bank has solved the energy problem. I tell them, "Okay, 10 years later we'll learn." But so that's 10 years later. Right now, I've got a report I can work with. So I think we really need to look at what I call the epistemology of policy. How is policy made? Who does the research for policy? And we don't talk about that. We think that any report is okay. But you've seen reports, I've seen reports, many of them are not okay. And unless we can digest and absorb them, and unless we have the capacity to indulge in peer review and really discuss them, we can be led up the garden path and we can talk about that. For example, take the evaluations of the World Bank or evaluations of anything, even the IMF. 10 years later, we hear the evaluation. Montek did one for the IMF. Many people have this. That look, the evaluation said the program didn't work well. It was not designed well. But by then, we got the loan and we had to pay for it. So how do we fix this? So these are deep problems. I don't think we can solve them in one show. But these are things that we should talk about and think about.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. I think it's okay to kind of preview the discussion with more questions to answer than to have the answer to every question that was put forth. There's always, food for thought, and these are very big questions that need to be addressed over the next period of time if the country has to kind of find its way towards an upward trajectory. But on that note, thank you for highlighting things.
Please take them up. Unless the media starts thinking about these issues and talking about them, we have this very superficial discussion. Who's going to win the next election? Would it be Bilawal or Mariam or whatever? I think those are very trivial questions. We have to ask these deeper questions. How is policy made? Who makes policy? Who does the research? How do we take decisions? Where is it discussed? How is it absorbed by the people? I think these are deeper discussions that we must have. Thank you very much.
No, absolutely. I cannot agree more. And I think it's very interesting that you've highlighted this particular perspective because it is not spoken of at all. Whenever we talk about the economy, usually the same issues are reinforced, they're spoken of again. And I think before we step to the solution part, it's kind of important to put the spotlight on things which are not talked about. And so thank you for your time.
You're absolutely correct. Economy, Nauraiz, has become like a religion. Somebody says, we must increase the tax to GDP. The other economist says, amen. Somebody says, we must have export debt. The other guy says, amen. So we become a bunch of priests, and that's why we're going to lose out. Thank you. All the best to you.
Thank you. You too.